Hi, good morning, Emma. It'll also be interesting to see if Democrats and the media call for the transcripts of that meeting like they did the Trump-Putin summit from Helsinki. Talking about it, President Biden is now on his way, currently en route to the Brussels airport to fly to Geneva, Switzerland for that meeting. Earlier today, he had a meeting with the King of Belgium. He also held a European Union U.S. summit, which he just left. But clearly, the focus is now on that highly anticipated meeting between he and the Russian president, the first face-to-face sit-down the two will have, as both leaders of their country. Vice President Biden has met with Putin before in his capacity as vice president. Now, Biden has had a lot to say about Putin. He talked a big game about the Russian president during the campaign and criticized his predecessor for what he says was being soft on Vladimir Putin. But yesterday, during a press conference following the NATO summit that was 2.5 hours late, and Biden read from a teleprompter, he also only took 5 questions. One of those 5 questions was actually, does he still believe that President Putin, Vladimir Putin, is a killer? But Biden having a little trouble answering that question.
In a weekend interview, Vladimir Putin laughed at the suggestion that you had called him a killer. Is that still your belief, sir, that he is a killer?
Well, look, I mean, he has made clear that the answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he...
So Biden there struggling to find the words. There is a lot of questions about how he had such a hard time answering that question. And look, Emma, that's a long way from where the former vice president, now president, said that during a meeting once he looked into Putin's eyes and told him he had no soul.
Yeah, very interesting moment. Of course, we're also anticipating a solo press conference post that meeting with Vladimir Putin. Yep. So we'll see who the president calls on in that situation there, the reporters in the room. Also want to ask you about this, Emerald. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson addressing some of the criticism that European leaders have faced regarding China. What did he say?
Yeah. Look, the Group of 7 did put some rhetoric towards China in their communique. At the end of their summit, it got criticized for saying there was no direct commitments to hold China accountable for their human rights abuses. So yesterday, or recently, UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson tried to answer to that, but he continued to hedge a bit when it comes to China.
I don't think anybody around the table today wants to descend into a new Cold War with China. I don't think that's where people are, but I think people see challenges. They see things that we have to manage together, but they also see opportunities. And I think that what we need to do is do it together.
Emma, I've been talking to lawmakers here and their staffers on the Hill about what they're seeing out of the summits regarding China, the language, possible actions, and they are very concerned. They're concerned that the world leaders just don't take China seriously enough, and they say even our leaders here in Washington, D.C. That is one of the major concerns I hear about when I talk to lawmakers. Emma.
All right. Yeah, and you're talking to those sources every single day. Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson. Emerald, thank you.
All right, for reaction now, we'll bring in Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. There's a lot I want to talk to you about. You've been making headlines with that surveillance video there at your house. I'm going to ask you a little bit about that and have you weigh in. But before I get to that, we played some of the sound from President Biden giving his briefing. He was asked a question about his upcoming meeting with Vladimir Putin. There was a 25-second delay when asked, do you still think Putin is a killer? That wasn't edited in any way. This was the president of the United States not knowing how to weigh in on Vladimir Putin. What are you expecting to come out of this meeting between these two world leaders?
Well, I don't know, but I am very much saddened that it's becoming more and more apparent that Joe Biden is slowly but surely losing his mental acumen that is necessary for the job. Hopefully he'll be up to the task when he meets with Vladimir Putin because the stakes are so high. By way of example, Russia just got through attacking the United States of America's energy supplies with Colonial Pipeline, attacking our food supply, and Joe Biden needs to make sure that that issue is brought to the forefront and that this kind of criminal activity by a foreign nation is stopped dead in its tracks.
There was also comments that the president made in regards to your party, sir. A Republican Party is a dying party, outlining that Trump supporters are the minority party. He weighed in on the Trump support, also describing it as phony. Listen to this. I'll get your reaction.
The leaders I'm dealing with in NATO and the G7 are leaders who know our recent history, know generically the character of the American people, and know where the vast center of the public stands. I think they, like I do, believe the American people are not going to sustain that kind of behavior. I think it is a shock and surprise that what's happened in terms of the consequence of President Trump's phony populism.
Your response to that?
Well, it's quite clear that the leaders of these other countries put their own countries first. I don't understand Joe Biden's hesitancy in also agreeing with President Trump that we need to make America #1 in the world as a status that we've held now for about 75 years. So America should be first in the minds of our policymakers and the minds of our negotiators when we go overseas and deal with both friends and adversaries on the world stage.
Domestic politics making its way across the pond. Do you care to weigh in on that?
Well, when you talk about domestic politics, I didn't hear any particular public policy issues domestically that were brought to the forefront. Although I do think it's inappropriate.
Let me just jump in really quick, if I may. The comment I'm making here is the fact that he said that the Republican Party is dying and that the folks that voted for Trump are the minority. In bringing that to the world stage, is that appropriate? And do you agree, is the Republican Party dying?
It is inappropriate for the President of the United States to go overseas and make those kind of attacks against another political party. But let's be real clear. I'm sure Joe Biden wishes that we're dead, but you're going to see us rising to the surface come 2022 because we're going to beat their socks off in the House of Representatives. And most likely, we're also going to take the Senate to boot. So this may be wishful thinking on the part of Joe Biden and his handlers, but it ain't going to be true come 2022.
All right, strong words from the congressman there. Before you go, I've got to ask you about this. What happened at your house here? I know you released this dramatic surveillance video we're showing our audience now, showing what appears to be an investigator working for what we're told is Congressman Eric Swalwell chasing your wife up your driveway. There is that person pulling in and then running into your house. You said this person is violating, or this is a violation of trespassing. What's the latest on this front for the viewers that may be catching up? What happened here?
Well, I don't understand Eric Swalwell's strategy. He and I have been on the House floor roughly 100 times since he filed the lawsuit. He could have served me or had somebody else serve me on the House floor as I'm walking to and from the Capitol and my House office building. Plenty of opportunities there, but for whatever reason, they want to mischaracterize things. And then since what happened that you just saw in that video, I've been served another 2 or 3 times. I can't even keep track of them all. Nonetheless, what happened on that day, it is a criminal offense. It carries up to a year in jail and $6,000 fine. And my wife, Martha, is going to be soon obtaining an arrest warrant that's been approved by our district attorney's office, by the Huntsville Police Department, and also, I believe, soon by a warrant magistrate.
As we have there the full screen of that law there. Congressman, thank you so much for weighing in on that. We do appreciate that. I hope we'll see you again. That is Congressman Mo Brooks. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.